She like when I beg for kisses. Put a ring on it, I'm about to call you Nessus. She like when I beg for them kisses. And if I went to prison, she gon' be there for them visits. She like when I beg for them kisses. She with me when I'm broke. I wanna give y'all a couple pointers and secrets to mixing down a vocal the proper way. I do a lot of engineering work for KI back at it, helping him put down a lot of his mixing and mastering. And it's just a certain way you have to have the vocals actually sitting in the mix. And I'm gonna show you the 3 or 4 basic things that you have to do to make that happen. Most people don't do it, you know? But let's go to the first thing. The first thing is going to be this EQ. As you can see, you always want to go to that 200 mark. Kind of leave it, for the high pass. Lift up that back. And it's going to be depending on your vocal, depending on how how hard you spit the vocal, or how hard they delivered the vocal is where you're going to set the levels at for the EQ. But almost for 99% of the vocal is always going to be set similar to like this. Whether it's rap, whether it's mumble rap, whether it's singing, etc. This is how you're going to start it off. Number 2, it's really, really important. This is where I notice a lot of people right here kind of shows that, they're amateur when they don't do this. And it's the compressions. The compressions is very, very important. The compression is what actually sets the vocal into the middle of the mix and sets the limitation to how far the vocal could go, how wide, etc. Now when it comes to pop, hip-hop, R&B, most of the time you want to have the release. The release is always going to be set something at maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, but it's always going to be set kind of low. Then you got your attack. The attack is always going to be between 0 to 50. You don't want it to be too loud. It's going to push the vocal a little bit too much out the mix, and it's going to make the vocal too loud. The knee, it's, depending on the strength of the vocal, I like to put it somewhere between 0 to 7. Like I said, depending on the delivery of the vocal or the singer. Then the ratio, which is another very important level, should always be set something at 3, 3.5, 3.0, something like that. The ratio. Then you got the threshold. Another thing, depending on the delivery, depending on the power of the flow, the wordplay, you want to bring that threshold back. The threshold is kind of what takes a lot of the pressure out the vocal. And no matter if they're screaming or no matter if they're yelling, that threshold is going to keep that vocal sitting right in the middle of that beat. That way you don't, hear it out too much, and that way it sounds centered. And the same thing with the gain. Depending on the power of the vocal, you want to have that gain sitting maybe right above the line, or maybe right under the line. Like I said, you just got to listen on the speaker or on the headphones, and that way you'll know how to measure that vocal out, and you want to measure out the beat at the same time. Those are the main things right there that'll make your vocal sit in the mix properly. And I notice a lot of people, they don't use those. Like number 3 would be the delay. Delay is what kind of stretches out the vocal to give it that auto-tune effect, even though it's not going to sound like an auto-tune, but it's going to give it that feedback. It's going to give it that little delay in the back, you know, make them words not sound so much like the straight words, but more like soft words, more like singing a word. And it's going to give it that little feedback in the background that you just kind of hear slightly, depending on how you set it down. Setting a delay could be real complicated if you don't know what you're doing, or if you don't know how to set it. But I advise that you just work with the delay for a little bit, you know, the length or how much feedback needed, just the volume of the feedback that's going to be in the background. You set the tunes on it, you set the level, or how wet you want it, how much you want in it, this and that. But I think it's really important to use that delay in every mix though, especially if you're singing or if you're doing like sing rap, etc. This right here would be similar to the EQ. It's the dynamics of the vocal. Most people have it set similar to the EQ. The front end is going to be low, the back end is going to be high. But like I said, depending on the vocal, you want to have this mid-level right here sitting kind of low. You don't want this right here to be too high. That's going to have the vocal screaming. It's going to be above the beat. But like I said though, the 3 basic things when it comes to mixing down the vocal and having the sound right. Of course, you know, you got the auto tunes, and you got, you know, like your reverbs to help bring out the voice a little bit. And then you got, you know, the surround sound of the vocal, depending on, you know, the zoom. If you want the vocal to be a wide, or you want the vocal to be a little bit smaller, or if you want to take out some of the mids of the vocal, or if you want the vocal to sound more surround sound, you know, it's all different type of, you know, ways to bring the vocal out. You got the pitch, you know, add a little pitch, add a little semitones to it. It's all different type of things you could do, but those 3 main first things is how you actually have a vocal sitting in the mix a professional way. The industry, we call that the industry style mix. So if you like that, if you're interested in learning more, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. Anybody else got any questions or whatever the case may be, hit me up, let's work. That's it.